If you've ever played a video game or watched an action movie set in Tokyo, you already know the archetype, the Yakuza. Sharply dressed in designer suits, covered in elaborate tattoos, missing a pinky finger, and running the neon-lit criminal underworld with absolute terrifying authority. But today, if you actually encounter a Yakuza boss on the streets of Japan, there's a good chance he'll be leaning on a walking cane. Police raids nowadays look less like high-stakes shootouts and more like senior wellness checks, arresting frail men in their 70s and 80s. So how exactly did the most feared, organized, and wealthy criminal empire on Earth end up slowly, literally, dying of old age? To understand their collapse, we have to go back to their beginnings in the Edo period. Japan's strict social hierarchy placed street peddlers, known as tekiya, and professional gamblers, the bakuto, at the absolute bottom of society. They were outcasts, operating in the chaotic margins of street markets and back alleys. These gamblers played a traditional card game called oicho kabu, where the goal is to draw 3 cards that add up to a score ending in 9. If you draw an 8, pronounced ya, a 9, ku, and a 3, za, your hand adds up to 20. In the rules of the game, a 20 gives you a score of 0. It is a completely useless, losing hand. Yakuza. These societal outcasts took that exact word for loser and wore it as a badge of honor. Rejected by mainstream society, the Yakuza banded together, creating their own shadow economy with its own strict rules. Fast forward to the economic boom following World War II, and that shadow economy exploded. The Yakuza evolved into a corporate powerhouse. They infiltrated boardrooms as corporate blackmailers, known as sokaya, and extorted massive sums from construction firms, even embedding themselves into the lucrative contracts for building Japan's nuclear reactors. To manage this massive wealth, they enforced absolute internal discipline using a chivalrous code called ninkyo. A new recruit didn't just sign a contract, they underwent the Sakazuki ceremony. By sharing sake from the same cup as the boss, the recruit swore a permanent, unconditional blood oath to the organization. If a member broke that oath or made a severe mistake, an apology wasn't enough. They had to perform yubitsume, the ritual self-amputation of the tip of their own pinky finger, which was then presented to the boss. The ritual targets the specific mechanics of Japanese swordsmanship. When holding a katana, your grip strength comes primarily from your bottom fingers. By removing those digits, a Yakuza member became physically weaker in a fight. He could no longer defend himself effectively alone, forcing him to rely completely on the protection of his boss. The syndicate's strength lay in this highly calculated system. They engineered a structure of total dependency, where leaving or betraying the family became physically and socially impossible. By the late 20th century, this structure allowed 3 massive syndicates to dominate Japan: the Inagawa Kai, the Sumiyoshi Kai, and the undisputed heavyweight, the Yamaguchi-gumi. Unlike the Italian mafia, these syndicates operated completely out in the open. They had marked office buildings, listed phone numbers, and members who proudly displayed their full-body tattoos at public festivals. They were wealthy, entrenched, and largely tolerated by authorities, but that tolerance evaporated when the syndicates started turning on each other. In 2015, the Yamaguchi-gumi suffered a massive internal schism. Dissatisfied factions fractured off, creating bitter rival groups like the Kobe Yamaguchi-gumi and later the Kizuna-kai. What followed was a brutal, very public turf war. The conflict spilled out of the shadows and onto civilian streets, bringing daylight assassinations, retaliatory shootings, and targeted car rammings straight to hospital parking lots and residential neighborhoods. For decades, the Japanese public accepted the Yakuza as a necessary evil that kept petty street crime in check. By bringing violent payouts into public daylight, the syndicates broke that unwritten social contract, handing the government the exact mandate it needed to crush them. The state responded with the Yakuza exclusion ordinances. Instead of just arresting bosses, the government targeted the organization's ability to exist in modern society. Overnight, anyone affiliated with a designated syndicate was legally barred from opening a bank account, signing a lease on an apartment, or even buying a cell phone. The laws effectively rendered Yakuza members socially dead. Legitimate businesses cut ties immediately to avoid extreme fines. Under this intense, suffocating police pressure, syndicates were forced to sell off their headquarters, and thousands of lower-level members simply resigned to survive. This chart shows the catastrophic collapse in their numbers. In 1963, Yakuza membership peaked at over 184,000. Today, that number has plummeted to fewer than 20,000 nationwide. When you look closely at the ages of those remaining members, the reality is even worse. Young criminals want nothing to do with the restrictive, unprofitable Yakuza lifestyle. As a result, over half of all current members are over 50 years old, with a large chunk in their 60s and 70s. The world's largest criminal empire isn't being taken down by rival gangs or dramatic shootouts. They are being erased by bureaucratic strangulation and the simple, unavoidable passage of time. The criminal economy in Japan hasn't disappeared, but it has mutated. Surviving gangsters are abandoning their crests and strict codes to form what police call tokuryu, fluid, anonymous networks that operate completely outside the traditional Yakuza structure. Instead of running elaborate extortion rackets, these decentralized groups use social media to recruit desperate teenagers for yamibaito, shady part-time jobs. These disposable recruits act as pawns to execute online investment fraud and targeted home robberies, shielding the older bosses from the law. The men who once commanded respect through swordsmanship and rigid honor codes now sit behind computer glasses, squinting at crypto charts to pay their rent. Centuries ago, a group of Edo period outcasts took the worst hand in a card game and used it to build a multi-billion-dollar underworld empire. Now, stripped of their wealth, their power, and their youth, the remaining members are ending up exactly where they began, as societal losers waiting for the end.